If you would turn to Ezekiel chapter 37, that's where we're going to spend our time tonight. Looking at Ezekiel and some of his prophecies, or at least one of his prophecies. But when you think about Ezekiel, I hope that you'll take your mind back to what was going on at the time. Jerusalem was in peril. The Babylonians had come down in 606, and then again in 596, and then finally again in 586, and completely destroyed Jerusalem and carried many of the young men and the people off into captivity. Many people had died. It was really a bad situation until finally again in 586, they completely destroyed Jerusalem, leaving it, as one writer would say, a haunt for jackals. Nothing was left there. Kind of a sad picture, isn't it, when you think about it? They've gone through 15, 20 years of utter destruction. People dying of war, of famine, of pestilence. People that they loved, especially the young people, being taken off to a foreign land, not knowing what was going to happen to them. It's a sad, dark time. Good evening. Glad you're here. You could be watching two of the best football teams in the country, right? But instead you're here with the fourth round preacher and first round song leader. Excellent job on the songs, by the way, and good job leading us. But you could be doing a lot of different things, but thank you for being here tonight and spending some time in the Word. I do hope it's going to be encouraging. We're not going to leave it at gloom and doom, okay? But for a minute, I want you to think about their mindset of the people of Israel at this time, or the people of Jerusalem at this time. Turn it on. Because what had they been taught all of their life as they were growing up? What had they been taught? They had been taught about a God that created the universe, that spoke it into existence and had it moving and going in 6 days. And then he rested on the seventh. That's what they were taught about the God that they served and the God that they worshiped. They had been taught that their God was so powerful that when things got bad, he caused it to flood on the earth and destroyed evil people whose every inclination was only evil all the time, and saved those people that were following him. That's the God that they had been taught about. They had been taught about a God that led Abraham from a country far away to a place where he didn't know where he was going. He had taken him and said, you just follow me, and I'm going to make your descendants as plentiful as the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore. That's the God that they served, a God that led his people, that took care of his people, that they had a God that opened the waters when his people were in danger and rescued them from 400 years of slavery in Egypt to take them back to the promised land. That Moses just held up his arms and God pushed those waters back and his people walked through on dry ground. That's the God they were taught about. They were taught about a God who had his people walk around the strongest walls of a city that could be built and blow the trumpets and the walls fell down. Really? That's a powerful God. That's an amazing God. They were taught about God who gave strength and courage to David, who stood up to a giant in Goliath. This young man, took one rock and killed a giant. It's a powerful God that can help you win in battle like that, right? They were taught about a God who was the God of Solomon, the wisest man to ever live, and built this incredible structure, the temple. It was overlaid in gold, and it was the center of their life. And it gave them hope, and it was where God supposedly lived or dwelled in some respects. And yet, in 586, that building's destroyed. and gone. So that's what they were taught about. But what had they experienced? They had experienced the Babylonian king who comes down, isn't happy with the way they're running things, doesn't want them to rule on their own, and brings his army with them and wipes them out. They experienced the burning of their city, destruction all around them. They experienced exile, carrying their people off into a foreign land. Had experienced the ultimate despair, tragedy, and loss. So what do you say to people like that? What do you say to people like that, where everything they have known from the beginning, everything they have been taught is turns on its head, and they have to feel abandoned, betrayed, lost, and hopeless? And so God speaks through Ezekiel in Ezekiel 37. Let's read a little bit, if you will. The hand of the Lord was upon me, and he brought me out by the Spirit of the Lord and set me in the middle of a valley, and it was full of bones. He led me back and forth among them, and I saw a great many bones on the floor of the valley, bones that were very dry. And he asked me, Son of man, can these bones live? What is your response in that situation? First of all, this is creepy, right? Anybody agree with that? Anybody going to be scared if you're taken to a valley and it's just full of dry, brittle bones? Is anybody a visual person in here? Can anybody see that in your mind? Imagine walking around on human bones? Yeah, some of you can. I see it in your face. It's creepy. This is the stuff Halloween stories are made out of, right? And yet God took him there. And it's not just freshly dead bones. It's not partially decomposing. It's not any of this. This is completely dry, dead, brittle bones. And he takes them and he walks among them. And God asked him, Son of man, can these bones live? Your response? What is your response when you're speaking to God about this? We know what Ezekiel's response was, right? I don't know. It's kind of a cop-out, isn't it? Maybe if you had been there, the person of great faith that you are, you would have said, oh, yes, Lord, if you say these bones can live, they're going to live. It's going to happen. I know you can do it. Is that what you would have said? Maybe you'd been more like me. Oh, no. No, there's not a chance. These things are gone. They're brittle. They're dried up. They're gone. You know, there are bones in your ear, right? Smallest bones you have in your body, I think. They're not connected to anything. And yet, God is going to tell him to speak to those bones in a minute. Isn't that weird? So Ezekiel's response is kind of a cop-out. He doesn't say, yes, I know they can, or no, they can't. He just says, Lord, you know. I'm going to leave it to you. So he goes on. Verse 4. Then he said to me, prophesy to these bones and say to them, dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. This is what the sovereign Lord says to these bones. I will make breath enter you, and you will come to life. I will attach tendons to you and make flesh come upon you and cover you with skin. I will put breath in you, and you will come to life, and then you will know that I am the Lord your God. Are you seeing this in your mind? Are you experiencing this along with Ezekiel, who's hearing these words? You're going to make these bones come to life? There's no way. But yet this is the next line. God says, speak to these bones. They can't hear. Speak to these bones, but they're dead and brittle. Speak to these bones. Ezekiel's line is, so I prophesied. Isn't that amazing faith? Isn't that something that just sends chills down my spine? Of course, chills are already in my spine because I'm seeing these dead bones everywhere. But God said to speak to these dry, brittle bones, and so Ezekiel says, so I prophesied as I was commanded. I just did it. Their eardrum, their ear bones, they're laying there on the ground and they're not banging on anything, but I spoke to them. So I prophesied as I was commanding, and as I was prophesying, there was a noise, a rattling sound, and the bones came together, bone to bone. And I looked, and tendons and flesh appeared on them, and skin covered them, but there was no breath in them. Then he said to me, prophesy to the breath. Prophesy, son of man, and say to it, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Come, breath from the four winds, and breathe into these slain, that they may live. So I prophesied as he commanded me, and breath entered them, and they came to life, and stood up a vast army. Now do you have chills? Are you seeing this? This valley that was full of dry, brittle bones, now there's this rattling noise. And the bones start coming together and tendons start appearing, and I'm already creeped out. But you know what the most amazing sound I think would have been that day? The rattling was probably loud and probably intimidating. But when he prophesies to the breath, and all of a sudden this standing vast army goes and breathes. And God has brought back from the dead this vast array of people. And notice he doesn't say, hey, it's this big group of people standing around. That's not what he says. It's this vast army. They have a purpose. They have a mission. They're not just there to stand around. It's a vast army to do his will and to carry out his orders. A vast army. That says morning. This is not morning. But maybe you're in a valley of dry bones this morning. I said it too. Told you I was a C team here. Can't even tell morning from night. Maybe you're in a valley of dry bones tonight. You feel hopeless and lost and confused. Maybe you're as stunned as I am when you hear the loss of Joanne, who was just sitting here a few weeks ago, seems like. And gone just like that. You're in a valley of dry bones this evening because there's sin in your life that you can't stop. You can't seem to get rid of it. No matter how you've tried, no matter how much you've prayed, no matter how much you've tried to work at it, you just have sin in your life that you just can't get rid of. And you have no hope about the future and where you're going and what's going to happen to your life in the future. Maybe that's why you're in a valley of dry bones. Maybe you're in a valley of dry bones because of somebody else's sin. Somebody else has hurt you. Somebody else has injured you. Somebody else has done something that has sent you into a tailspin. And you don't know which way's up. And you're hopeless and lost. Maybe you're in a valley of dry bones like Ralph is because of illness. You've had that diagnosis and you wonder, why me? And you're in despair and you're losing hope. This is my personal favorite though. Maybe you feel like you're in a valley of dry bones because of the current world situation. Maybe you're looking around at the world and all the sin in the world and the hardship in the world and the heartache in the world and the people turning against God and the crazy things that are going on. And you're looking at that and you're going, man, where is God in all this? And you sound a lot like the people of Jerusalem when their cities were being burned and the people were being killed. And they were like, where is God in all of this? We can't find him. And maybe that's the way you feel. I hear that all the time. Talking about Southern Africa Bible College at different places, invariably someone comes up to me and says, I tell you what, I'm glad y'all are doing that because someday Africa is going to send missionaries over here. Right? And I'm saying, not yet. We are not done yet. But maybe you feel hopeless and lost because of the current world situation. Well, what's our response? I think we can learn a lot from Ezekiel. That even though Ezekiel didn't have a commanding faith that said when God asked him if these bones could live, he said, well, I don't know. What if God had us walking over Houston, going back and forth across the city, looking at the sinful things that are taking place in our neighborhoods and in the city as a whole, and the hurt and the loss and the heartache and the despair in so many people's lives. And he says, hey, go prophesy to them. Or can those people live? Can they be redeemed? Can they have hope? What are we going to say? What is our answer? Is it, I don't know. It seems pretty hard. Or is our answer, yes, they can? Because our God is a God who is powerful and almighty and who hears the prayers of his people. And so as we're walking over the city and seeing the people lost and in sin and hurting, we say, yes, we know they can live again because we serve a God that can make that happen. We need to know. Now, I say that, but again, understand Ezekiel, he's not so sure. He's still kind of iffy. And yet God still took and used him. So even if you're iffy about whether or not Houston can be saved again and can be brought, or not again, but can be saved and the people that are lost and hurting brought to him, even if you say, God, you know, then there's hope. We need to know. The second thing we need to do, I love the line, prophesy to these dead, brittle bones, Ezekiel. And the next line is, and so I prophesied. If God asked you to speak to a brick wall, what would you say? Oh, that's completely ridiculous. I can't speak to a brick wall. It can't hear. Well, neither could these bones. And he spoke to those and that lived. They lived. When we walk out these doors and we're looking at the community around us, the people around us, we can't say, well, they don't want to hear. I can't share with them. They're too lost in sin. We need to prophesy as we're commanded. Even if it seems ridiculous. We need to love and serve and honor God by speaking Jesus' name to the people around us. No matter how ridiculous the situation might seem. Because I think we're going to hear rattling. Listen for it. There's rattling taking place in this community. There are bones wanting to come together and making noise as they do. And we can't hear it sometimes because we're so focused on other things. We're so focused on the news and how bad things are. We're so focused on our own stuff and our financial situation or whatever that is, whatever we have going on. Or we're so focused on just the things that are busyness. And we fail to listen for those rattling bones. Maybe we hear it as something else because there's people out there. All this confusion in the world, all these people searching for meaning and purpose in all these strange and weird ways. You know what they're looking for, right? They're looking for God. And if we hear that rattling as anything else, I think we're missing the point. We need to know that our God is powerful and can do amazing things, that he can bring dry, brittle bones back to life. We need to do. No matter how ridiculous the situation, if God says, and I command you to prophesy to these, and so we prophesied. So we loved, so we served. And then let's listen. Let's listen. Because not only are we going to hear those dry, brittle bones coming back together in that rattling, we're going to hear breath of life given back to people as we do as God commands us. And we're going to hear that collective throughout Houston and the world. May God bless you with strength and courage and hope to know that we serve a God that's powerful and can do great things. If you have any needs tonight, won't you come as we stand and sing this song? These are the days.